I mean, maybe one of the important things first is to distinguish intelligence and polymathy. So
Okay.
being a polymath doesn't mean you're very, very smart. Sometimes they run together for various reasons we'll discuss, but being a polymath simply means that you have a deep curiosity and passion for learning, and for learning in many different directions.
Welcome to Old Guy Talks to Me, a podcast dedicated to helping guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. Ladies, if you want to know what your guy is thinking, this podcast is for women too. Each week, a special guest helps you create that life you've imagined. We talk anti-aging medicine, personal growth, relationships and hot sex. Yeah, you hear me, getting laid more frequently. Other guy vices, and topics that many don't want to talk about but need to. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean you have to be old. Don't want to miss anything? Be sure to subscribe, share, rate, and review this podcast. And be sure to go to www.thestandard.academy/magazine and grab a free copy of our new digital magazine, The Standard Academy, where we talk about erogenous zones, growing hair back, and other things that will help you create that kick-ass life. Now get ready to listen up and share with friends.
This is Oris, the official old guy at oldguytalkstome.com, a podcast dedicated to helping older guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. And part of that sometimes it's helpful sometimes to be around really smart people. And today, my guest is one of those really smart people. He is a polymath. Justin Lancaster is an entrepreneur, an inventor, a scientist, and an attorney. He's educated in math, physics, chemistry, and biology, trained in laboratory and field science, and is an expert in computer simulation of dynamic systems and 3D visualization of real-world systems. He has experience in software development, programming, internet SaaS, and informatics. I have to look up what SaaS
SaaS,
is.
software as a service. That's
Yes,
it's a business model.
There were a lot of things I had to look up in preparation for for this interview. Justin conceived and initiated in 1994 the Integrated Monitoring, Modeling, and Management project that enabled clean the Charles River in Boston by utilizing citizen science joined with advanced computer modeling. In 1995, at age 40, he founded GeoSoftware Inc., a 1995 SaaS startup that invented GeoVoyager, a forerunner to technology for Google Earth. And Lancaster and Bell's 2001 patent this field is widely cited. Justin is an internationally recognized polymath, being a member of the Prometheus Society, the Four Sigma Society, and the 999 Society, and ranked in the top 200 people in the World Genius Directory. Now, folks, I actually looked this up. Like I said, I did a lot of research here. There actually is a World Genius Directory. It goes from the top one is 202 points. They list you by name according to your IQ, and it drops down to 130. Needless to say, the old guy did not make the cut, and that happens pretty often to me in life, but I did not make the cut at 130. So he is just so you don't think that Justin here is a total geek nerd. He is a former professional alpine ski racer in his early 20s and forerunner VT Junior Alpine Champion, Vermont. He is also a sailor and aircraft pilot, and in 1980, he bicycled 3,300 miles across the United States. He's a pianist, having played improvisational jazz in small venue concerts at events and accompaniments. Justin is certified as a life activation practitioner with the International Modern Mystery School in North America, and is a certified Reiki master. All right. And we could have gone on for hours with this introduction.
I'm glad it's over.
Justin, I got to tell you that the materials, you hold the record for having sent me the most free materials. Some of my guests will send me like 2 paragraphs or something, but I'll tell you, and actually it was very interesting to learn about you in preparation for this, because I think there's a lot of stuff. So I won't say always, most of the time, unless I forget, I start off my questioning with this: What is the most important thing you've done today?
The most important thing I've done today,
Yes.
is that what you said?
Yes.
Today was to climb a small mountain in New Hampshire with my dear wife, my new wife. We're still in our first few months of marriage, and I promised to myself that I would be dedicated to making this relationship magical. And I knew one of her dreams was to be able to get up in the morning and say, let's go hike a mountain, and to just go do it. And I will admit that hasn't always been my pattern in life, to just be that, usually it'd be like, let's go Thursday, we'll plan it and maybe pack a lunch or something. And here I knew I had to be back for this podcast. And my first inclination was, no, how are we going to get all the way over to New Hampshire, climb a mountain, and me get back here and set up the microphones and all that stuff. So I first said no. And then I thought about it, and I did very quickly. I thought, okay, wait, I promised myself I was going to say yes to these things. And so that was absolutely the most important thing. And standing on top of this mountain, Oris, the last 20 minutes we're climbing rock. It's a bare rock top granite mountain in New Hampshire, and the foliage, New England foliage, 360 degrees around us. We could see 100 miles in every direction. It was glorious, and it felt healthy, it felt vigorous, and it made my wife happy. And so that was by far the most important thing I've done today.
When you say yes to your wife and make her happy, usually good things happen.
Yes. I so agree with that.
The reward may be delayed, but usually good things happen when you do that. So.
Well, this was fun. We might get into it a little later, but there's a bit of an age gap in this marriage. And I asked her father within the last year if I could have his daughter's hand in marriage. And he had to get through a bit of stuff to grapple with this whole decision over the last few years. But at our engagement dinner, he pulled me aside after dinner and said, look, the one important thing I've learned in marriage, and he's had a good marriage for a good 50 years, is, maybe 35 years. I don't want to make him too old. If your wife asks you to do something, just say yes to her. And do it.
Yeah.
And
perfect. Yeah.
it's so simple and so wise. We may have to qualify that a little bit, but in basic terms. Go ahead.
No, my wife and I used to joke that she talks and I don't listen. I never say no.
So that's a challenge for us. I think it's a challenge for us, because my experience is women talk differently than we do. I think they talk more to each other, and they listen differently, and it's difficult sometimes for us to listen to their stories of the day. It's important to try, but it's a challenge sometimes.
Well, I think one of the things to say that sometimes men often are very solution focused. They're like, they want to fix it like right away. Yes, and sometimes, and many I've interviewed a lot of sex therapists and relationship therapists and things like that, and they say sometimes a woman just wants to be heard.
Just wants to be heard. Yes. Yeah.
And don't be so quick to fix it. Now maybe it needs to be fixed, but let it just come out. So I've heard the word, and I didn't really know what it meant, other than the fact that I knew that whoever is designated a polymath is very smart. So what is actually a polymath?
Well, so maybe one of the important things first is to distinguish intelligence and polymathy. So being a polymath doesn't mean you're very, very smart. Sometimes they run together for various reasons we'll discuss, but being a polymath simply means that you have a deep curiosity and passion for learning, and for learning in many different directions. And so often in our culture, in our modern society, we get trained in one career path we major, we have to choose a major in college, and that tends to narrow our learning. And often if we major in the humanities, we tend to stop studying science. And if we major in science, the reverse, we stop studying psychology and economics and English. And so a polymath, I think it's safe to say, will push their learning in multiple directions, and often very disparate directions, and get the benefit of the crosstalk between those disciplines. So quite often there'll be some benefit in the polymathic path or polymathy in seeing patterns, for instance, in a scientific endeavor that can inform your learning in the humanities. And certainly there's some complex problems, the climate change problem, the human dimensions of global environmental warming, for instance, where you really need training in many disciplines to be able to hold that problem in proper scope. So I think that's the main part. You do find, I think, in I certainly in the polymathic groups on Facebook, and many polymaths do also turn out to be fairly bright. And part of that goes together because very bright people tend to be very curious and not satisfied in a single branch of learning. So they tend to look everywhere, to learn in every direction, I guess it's safe to say. And I want to distinguish between what I think of as capital P polymaths, like Da Vinci and Newton and Buckminster Fuller and maybe Thomas Jefferson, and the rest of us that in my mind, we're small p polymaths. In other words, we believe in the polymathic pathway of learning, but we don't pretend to be at that level of achievement. Very few people in my circle, for instance, and I'm not sure if we'll see many. Elon Musk is impressive, but he doesn't have sort of the broad scope that, say, a Da Vinci or a Jefferson had.
But he does have a sense of humor.
He does have a sense of humor.
They demonstrate
He's got a good sense of humor, which is important.
I normally don't follow a lot of people on Twitter. I mean, I hardly ever am on. I'm hardly ever on social media because I have a virtual assistant that does it for me. But I do follow Elon Musk. I always have to laugh at things. I mean, some of the stuff that he posts is just hilarious, and he does have a good sense of humor. So, when did you realize that you were a polymath? Kind of take us through that process.
Well, I realized that I was going to be a multidisciplinary student in my 20s, actually. So I ended up bouncing between science and humanities. I had gone into science and mathematics, then bounced over into history and anthropology, and American studies was my first undergraduate degree. Then I went to law school, very interested in environmental law, but because my passion in science was so strong, I went back into science, did another 3 years of undergraduate study at UCSD before going to graduate studies in science at UCSD, or Scripps Institution of Oceanography. So I knew in my early 20s that I had this bent to be multidisciplinary. We just called it multidisciplinary. I think the label of polymath has been sort of bounced around in maybe the last 5 to 10 years. I met a really interesting guy named Michael Ferguson, who was creating on Facebook the Polymathic Institute. And there we began to sort of think about the label in modern terms. What does that mean for us? And then Polymath's Place erupted, and now there are people writing books about it people writing books recommending this as a path for learning, that there's a value to having more polymaths out there for certain types of problems that society is dealing with. I'm not totally convinced that you want to advise a young person to pursue a polymathic path. I'm not sure that it's I'm not sure you'll find your rewards economically. Our society is extremely tilted against this kind of learning or this kind of viewpoint. We're very, very much set up to reward specialists. And if you don't become the best in one area, it's very hard to get economic return for your labor.
Well, I was going to get to this later on, but since you brought it up, we'll do it again. I'll do it now. In her book, Aksenia Samoileva, she wrote about, you were one of several polymaths. I can't remember, things like 8 polymaths that she wrote about. And I found it at the end of the chapter, I found it very interesting that she wrote that you don't think of yourself as financially successful and lament some of the direction of your life. And to me, I mean, I'm not being, I look at your what you've done, what you've accomplished in your life, and I find it. I was like struck by that. That I was like, it surprised me. It surprised me. Now, you're too young to be living your laurels.
Lament might be too strong a word.
Okay,
but I guess it's fair that I certainly can't boast economic success.
Mm-hmm.
And I have ancestors who were very economically successful. So I have a great grandfather who built the Singer sewing machine company. And so in the 1800s was one of the wealthier guys around. And he combined his sharp expertise in engineering to redesign a machine somebody else had invented, and then did a great job of selling it. So he was a good showman, had some good theater skills, and really sold the heck out of that business. And it worked for him. And I've come at sort of a number of more mental disciplines, certainly the mathematics and the computer modeling and aspects of multidisciplinary science, and have not been successful in finding a business model where society sees this as valuable. So I have to conclude that in a sense, society does not see me as very valuable. And I've had trouble connecting my offering, my social offering of invention and vision for improving science and solving some of our problems. It's not been easy for me to find a place that gives me enough money to pay a mortgage and provide for family. And so there, I would say on the economic spectrum, I'm, sort of below average in that result. And there's nothing wrong with being on the lower end of the economic spectrum if you're living a happy life. And much of my life has been a happy life. So if things go as well as they're going now, the money doesn't really matter that much, but it matters to a lot of people. And so I like to be honest in particularly talking to young people who are, maybe looking at my career going, that's really great. I go, well, it's great for some things, but it might not be the path you want if economic success is your dream.
Do you need accountability? Are you looking to change the course of your life but have failed to keep on track? Too often we take in information and fail to act. Do you need an accountability program to stay the course? Then go to www.thestandard.academy and find out about my accountability program that goes with my course that helps you find out what you want, why you want it, and how to get it. The accountability program keeps you on track to get results.
We've been involved in a few startups, and actually, my wife sells mid-market companies. And what we've discovered a lot of the time is that the person who's actually the technology person behind the idea may not necessarily be the best person to sell it or be the CEO.
Certainly. Certainly.
I actually, we were involved in one where we actually had invested a good amount of money, and it was a carbon process, and I didn't really quite understand it, but they proved it out on used supercomputers in Hawaii to work it out and all that stuff, and all just stuff that was like way over my head, and they did an IPO and everything, but the CEO, the inventor, kept a tight rein on everything. And at the end of the day, there were no sales. After about 7 or 8 years doing the IPO, burning through a bunch of cash, and essentially his dream of his company died on the courthouse steps in Delaware. And gone was the 6,000 square foot cabin in Aspen. Cabin, I use quotations.
Wow. Yeah.
And everything else, just and it was unfortunate because the idea was actually very good and proven out, but at the end of the day, you got to have sales. And we're actually involved in another one that's not too dissimilar.
Good luck. Good luck.
With that. I don't know, it's going to take more than luck. But let's talk about education. Because you mentioned education, and I understand you had a little different educational path than was traditional for the time that when you were a young child. And I'm going to preface this by a story of a young boy that was in my daughter's class, and this was about the 2nd or 3rd grade, and the teachers, and this was actually a pretty good school. It was a parochial school in Phoenix, Arizona, nice school, very, affluent neighborhood and all that stuff. And the teachers had branded this boy as basically a mentally deficient, as a slow learner or whatever. And it was very interesting. And mom, very sharp woman, said, this doesn't sound right. And so she had him tested. And next thing you know, a few months later, he's attending Stanford. He's doing not kind of there was some sort of program for incredibly gifted kids, and it was run out of Stanford, and that's where he went from the 3rd grade at this parochial school in Phoenix, Arizona, to basically being educated at Stanford.
Yeah.
But tell us about your upbringing, your schooling.
Well, my parents were both interested in education. We were in Vermont. My parents had moved to central Vermont, and Vermont's kind of known for avant-garde educational experiments in the woods kind of thing. There are a bunch of little secondary schools that pop up here and there over the various decades. Sometimes they don't last very long. And my mom had tested us as kids. I think we had shown some giftedness in kindergarten and 1st grade, and I ended up skipping 1st grade. Both my brothers were very, very bright. I think brighter than me in different ways, each of them. And my older brother had trouble in school. Actually, we all had trouble with our teachers. And it's hard in elementary school when, in 2nd, 3rd grade, you realize your teachers aren't thinking as clearly about some things as you're able to. And sometimes they're saying stupid things. And so as a child, if you've been raised by parents that give you some backbone, which my parents did, my mom ended up in the Vermont legislature in the 70s, one of the first women in state legislature here. And so and my dad had been in the Army, and so we weren't raised to retreat. Let's just put it that way. And I got in trouble in public school and elementary school, and was asked to leave 8th grade early. And so I ended up starting high school fairly young. And so I was 2 or 3 years younger than most of the kids in the school. And again, I think that's difficult. I'm not sure I would put a young kid into Stanford. I think putting a young kid in a group of older kids doesn't help the socialization problem. It's hard enough being a bright person in a group of people, because humans are extremely quick to form in-group and out-group attribution. We assess each other very, very quickly to, are you a Red Sox fan or a Yankees fan? We know almost immediately based on your accent, if you're a sports fan, or if if you love Donald Trump. These things come out pretty quick. Even if you don't speak it, we pick it up non-verbally. And as soon as one person in the group detects that someone else in the group is out group, it's immediately transmitted through the group. And so I didn't see this so clearly until many decades later, that this had been happening to me all through my life. And Ferguson talks about this as the unintentionally excluded, or the unfortunately excluded population, which has to do with giftedness and intelligence. The group is not comfortable with us in the group. We're detected as in a sense being slightly alien. We're outsiders because we're perceived very quickly as thinking slightly differently, or having a slightly different attitude about the whole group and the dynamics of the group. And in a bunch of boys, for instance, out on a playground in elementary school, the hierarchies very, very quickly formed around various sports aspects, or just various bravado or attitude. And typically a bright, gifted kid won't play into that. We'll stand away from that entire operation. So we're very, very quickly perceived as being out-grouped. And they've done studies in this, that it turns out that, one problem, this is why the police won't hire policemen above a 120, 130 IQ, for instance. This was understood to be not conducive to the need to form relationship between the police and the population they're policing. You need to have the population willing to feel that the person that they're supposed to be following is part of their group. There's a trust, there's a bond that forms. And if there's this gap, which they found to be about 30 IQ points, basically 2 standard deviations, the group will shut their ears to leadership. This is why you have very, very few political leaders who are in very high IQ groups. You just don't see it, because there's a gap in the ability to communicate. And so this is a problem in schooling. You become very much outside the social circle if you're thrust into a large group of older. First of all, they're older. So you have the whole socialization problem of being a young kid in an older group. You're not as mature emotionally, and you're perceived as an outsider. So I don't think that's a healthy path. My parents formed a homeschool for my younger brother and sister, and brought a bunch of other kids in and formed a social group and helped build that cohesion. My brother and I went to this alternative progressive summer school, and it was called Woodstock Country School. It was a lot like the Summerhill model in England, where we were choosing our courses all through high school. Often I would have a one-on-one course with a math teacher, or maybe I'd be in a Latin class with only 2 other students. So it was a lot of freedom to start choosing my own educational path. A lot of independent study. I was doing an independent study project in environmental science. So I actually set up a water quality monitoring and modeling project in high school. Early 70s, 80s, 90s. So a full 25 years before I was replicating it in the Charles watershed.
I think it's interesting because I'm just actually rereading Jordan Peterson's book, The 12 Rules of Life. I don't know if and he talks a lot about hierarchies and how they're established and what they mean, and the tribal systems, and how the hierarchies, and humans aren't a lot of people don't know, but humans aren't the only people that have hierarchies. He spends a long time talking about hierarchies in the lobster world.
Yes, he points out that it's a biological principle that goes back millions of years, tens of millions of years.
And it goes through quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit about living past 100.
Oh,
And
boy.
and what do you see as things that will not only enhance the longevity, but the quality of life beyond? I just had a few weeks ago, I had a physician who's in the functional medicine space, and we spent a lot of time talking about, and she uses a lot of stem cells and peptides and exosomes and things
Sure.
like that in her practice.
Sure.
Actually, she says, I'm an orthopedic surgeon who doesn't do very much surgery anymore. So what do you see out there in terms of people living past 100, and also in terms of the quality of their life?
Well, it's, I think, certainly important if we're going to extend our lives past 100 to focus on quality of life.
Mhm.
If you're going to even make it to 85, you want quality of life. My dad made it to 94, my mom to 92. Neither of them had good quality of life for the last 5 years. And so I think that's sad. And so I think it's a great question you're asking to ask about quality of life. Certainly, coming down the mountain today, so I'm 67, and bouncing down the rocks, the first thing you notice, obviously, when you get older is you lose the spring. So we're losing flexibility. We lose the bounce in our muscles. We lose the bounce in our joints. So when I go skiing now and I go over a bump and I land, what used to be, a bouncy landing is now just a thud. And I'm like, what is wrong? Modern skis have no spring in them. No, my legs don't have this. My joints and legs don't have the spring. So this whole lubrication of the joints I think is a really important problem. And this seems to be related to inflammation, with the chronic inflammation and arthritis. And it appears maybe inflammation has to do with dementia. We've got a problem with the way our system reacts to itself. It tends to overreact, and we have trouble removing some of the garbage, much in the way that a house can become cluttered. We got to flush it more. And I'm not sure what the solutions are going to end up being, but it's basically to recover sort of the youthful vitality of every cell in the body. It may have to do with sort of stem cell capabilities, or the telomere. The shortening of telomeres is related to the senescence of cells. But there is good progress, certainly in mice, being able to rejuvenate the body physically and keep it younger. So that's an important part, I think, is to be able to maintain our flexibility and our, the spring in our step. And then, of course, our energy. Getting older, all of us realize that to do the 6 things that 20 years ago we could do in one day is just daunting now, because the energy to do any one thing is, you wonder, where did I ever have that energy? Where did it come from? And there, I think, lifestyle is important. That the whole focus on exercise, the more you generate energy and exercise, improve your diet, the more energy you have each day. And that's a tough one, because we get tired. We get tired, and it's like, oh boy, to get the energy up to go and do another 10,000 steps today. I got this Fitbit earlier this year, and I have a coach now. I have a coach who, if I don't do my 10,000 steps, and he's watching my weight, and it's hard. It's not easy. I think that's a critical aspect of quality of life, is to improve diet, energy, exercise. And then obviously to live past 100, we're going to need some aspect of rejuvenation, some way to kick up the, basically the various ATP, adenosine triphosphate generation in the body. So there's some ideas how to do that.
There's a lot of focus, and actually Elizabeth Yerth and I spoke about this, about inflammation and mitochondrial health. Because that seems to be a lot of the focus of the group of doctors who are serious and knowledgeable in this space, that they're really focusing on inflammation and the mitochondria in terms of energy source, and then basically clean up the systems and things like that. And there's lots of things that people can do in that area. And I'm going to be 70 in just a few days here.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And
I recently heard someone refer to this as chronologically enhanced.
Thank you for joining Dr. Orist and his incredible guest. Like what you heard and learned? Then be sure to do 3 things. 1, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. 2, share this with someone who may need to hear it. 3, leave a review and rate this podcast. Opt in at www.thestandard.academy/magazine and get our free digital magazine with savings, articles, and deeper dives into cool controversy. Be the guy who takes action. Without action, you're not going to get the results you want. Thank you again, and make it a great day.